Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 118 of the Sports Daily College Basketball Podcast. I'm your host, Sean Vowells. We've got Mike Koomar back. And, Mike, we have the first week of December here. We had some Big Ten play. We had the annual ACC SEC Challenge. We're out of feast week, but now that the weather's getting a little colder for us up in the north, football regular season is over. It seems like college basketball is starting to settle right in with some of the attention of the country right now, and it did not step a beat. A pretty good week of hoops here, and then we're going to preview a pretty good weekend of hoops up ahead. But let's start in the ACC SEC Challenge. Last year it was sort of a absolute demolishing by the SEC. They won 14 of the 16 games. Not so much this year. Pretty close. It started off with the defending champions going up to Cameron Indoor, and man, did they put up a pretty good effort, Mike. They lose by just 1 point. Duke gets to 9-0, 67-66 victory. Florida looking for that big win to sort of get themselves back on track, and it almost came here. I think you have to be pretty proud of, if you're a Florida fan here, that you're probably a little bit closer than you probably thought.
Yeah, this was a thin Florida roster too. A couple guys out. They only played seven guys the entire game, so they were able to compete wire to wire with Duke. And look, you're gonna lose a couple calls when you play against Duke at Cameron Indoor. Florida was probably a call or two away from winning this game. Is the reality of it. And you look at the start of this game. I thought there was a chance that Florida lost by 10 or 15 after watching the first 10 minutes, but they settled into this game. They were able to get good shots. Still looking to see more out of Condon for Florida. He played better tonight, or a couple nights ago, rather. Had 12 points, played 37 minutes, but was able to get that double-double against Cameron Boozer and some really good talent on Duke. So he's being much improved. Boogie Fland is also seems like he's starting to settle in a little bit as well. He added 16 in this one. Had a couple of rough starts for him. For the Florida Gators, look, they really just need to get that big win. They barely beat Florida State. They lost a probably not very good TCU team, lost to Arizona and Duke. So you're waiting for them to kind of get that jolt to their season. I don't think they're as bad as the record shows. They're going to probably drop down the rankings. They're probably going to be, if they beat UConn on Saturday or next week, rather, they'll jolt back up, but they're probably going to be in the 20s, which is surprising to think Florida. But I would not panic if you're a Gators fan. You still got a lot of time left to get this thing right. And I think they're still going to compete for an SEC championship. On
Yeah,
the flip side, you look at Duke and you look at a team that, look, it's kind of seemed like they squeezed this one out. I think if this played at Gainesville, they're not going to win this game. But Cameron Boozer continues to be the star for this Duke team. 29 points for the Blue Devils for him, 13 added for Isaiah Evans.
so, Mike, with Cam Boozer and Duke, he is probably the player of the year as of now. He is a really unique player in the way that he just runs the offense from the five, and
Yeah.
he's a great passer. So teams can't really double him, and he adds another 29 here. I think he has 30-point games already, and it's just a December of his freshman year. He's a real problem for
And he can also shoot
anybody,
the ball.
and he can make a three too. That helps. He is. It seems like to me that if Duke is anywhere near top 10 good, and he stays healthy, I think he's got it. Like he's got it. He's already plus 150 to win, and the next person's 500. They probably have the player of the year here. And Mike, it's just not really the same Duke under under Coach K. Like this John Shire teams, they're fun to watch. They're likable. They're not. It's hard to hate them.
Yeah.
If you're old enough to remember some of the Coach K teams that were, you know,
The
just
JJ
easy.
Reddick's, the Grayson
Yeah, yeah.
Allens,
I don't
the
want to say
third
dirty.
Christian Leitners.
I don't want to say dirty, but maybe got a little too close to the line. This
I'd
is
say
not
dirty.
them. If you're not old enough to remember those players, you would think Duke was awesome, and they are. They didn't play great here. They get the job done. And then in terms of Florida, Mike, they are 5-3, and look, coming into the year, you'd hope that they'd be in a better spot at this point. But I don't I don't know if they'll win the national title again, but they're still pretty good. Analytically, they're still 26th in the net. Like, I don't know if there's a whole lot to be worried about for Florida here. They do have to get over the hump with that big win. They have UConn at the Garden next week, but there'll be enough opportunities in the SEC as I have the net rankings here of the SEC teams. They are the seventh best team in the SEC at 26th. So while the top of the league may not be the elite that it was, they're still pretty solid across the board. They're going to get a ton of bids. But yeah, the analytics are saying that Florida will start winning more games than they have. But
just got to get over the hump.
Yeah, I mean they've like I really like what Todd Golden did. I don't think he should get fined for his comments, but like it was a big part of the game. Like it really was. They had the goaltending call. And I believe he burned his challenge. Or no, he had 2 challenges and he got them both right. So on top of that, I guess you can even that out a little bit now. But he said, you do have to beat Duke by 10 when you're there.
Yeah.
If you leave it in somebody else's hands, somebody can take it from you. And unfortunately, Florida came 1 point short here. All right, Mike, not a part of the challenge, but still a pretty big game here on Tuesday night. It was Dan Hurley and UConn going to the Fog to play Kansas. And this was another one that was really tight most of the way, but it's UConn that gets across the line and gets to 7-1 on the season. A 61-56 victory for the Huskies, who were without Terrace Reed here. But I know Kansas, still no Peterson for them, but this is a pretty impressive win from UConn.
Yeah, absolutely. Good stuff from UConn. And look, it did get close a few times at the end, but personally, I really felt like the last 8 minutes of this game, UConn owned it. They tied. I think Kansas tied the game up with about 4.5 minutes to go, um, or maybe they were down by 1. But the rest of the way, look, UConn owned it. They shut them down on defense, allowing just 2 points in the last 4.5 minutes of this game, and they were able to close them out. Look, Kansas could not score the ball well. They need Peterson back to be able to compete. I will say this about Kansas: they're doing a lot better without Peterson than I expected. We saw that in Players Era. We've seen that here. This team can play, and they might be able to compete for one of the top few slots in the Big 12. But with that being said, they're going to need their guy back. Right now, they're realistically getting like 6 guys, are playing. You're getting a couple minutes from Rosario, a few more minutes from Dawson. But at the end of the day, it's really like 6 guys that they need to get. They just need more out of their team.
Yeah,
UConn.
It's not the same formula for Kansas as it's been. Like they're at a talent deficiency in these games against big teams, and Bill Self is finding a way to make it ugly and keep it close. Like that's not the worst formula if you have the best closer in the game, which they probably do in Peterson. They're playing as a team. The chemistry's gone up. Like if we look back, Peterson comes back here, and they're back to being the 10th to 15th best team in the country. We're going to look at this and say that they figured it out here. Because when they played North Carolina and Peterson went off the floor in foul trouble, they were 20 points worse than North Carolina. North Carolina's a solid team, but I coming out of this game, if Kansas gets them back, they're a pretty good team. And then UConn too, Mike. They were without Terrace Reed, maybe their best player, but you obviously have solo ball and freshman guard Braylon Mullen stepping up with 17 points each. But I feel like both teams sort of liked that this one was ugly and slow, and it's UConn that just executed enough.
Yeah, you take it back to even the week before with a statement win against Illinois where they really dominated that game. 13-point victory didn't really do them justice. And then they go on the road to another place, right? There are 2 places that you got to beat a team by 10 points to win the game, and that's Duke and Kansas. And they went into the Fog and they got to win. That is an incredibly tough place to play, especially with the way that calls go. So 2 tremendous statement wins for the Huskies after that loss to Arizona.
And they do have Florida, like we said earlier, at the Jimmy V Classic next Tuesday. And then the return game of that Texas series, Mike, from last year up in Connecticut is on the 12th. And then Big East play starts. They don't do the little 2 step in the early of December, then go back to non-con. They just start conference play like around the 15th of December every year. So they have East Texas A&M before all that, but
Yeah, the
UConn
Lions.
is carrying the torch here for the Big East. And I'll bring up the net here, Mike, because one of the big takeaways from Feast Week from Joe and I is how bad the Big East was in terms of the numbers, and we had talked about it in the preseason, and it is bad. Just 5 teams in the top 100 in the net, and 2 of the 5 are teams that we thought would be nowhere near the top, in Butler and Seton Hall. Um, Villanova's at 44, St. John's at 16, but Big East has got to do some work here before their conference play starts, because half of their league being outside of the top 100 is not a good sign, because there's only so much you can do when you're playing each other.
Yeah, the Big East is in serious trouble right now. You look at a couple of these teams that they're going to be able, they're surprisingly better than we thought. Seton Hall and Butler, right? But we got to see Seton Hall win some quality games outside of Maui. You know, we got to see Butler sustain some more success. So I'm still, I'm not confident enough to say that I think those are tournament teams. Look, I think Georgetown and Villanova certainly can get to that level, but Creighton's been a total dud so far this year. You look at they got blown out of the gym at Gonzaga. They lost to Baylor in a game that they got dominated, and then they lost. They got crushed by Iowa State. They were able to salvage the players' era a little bit by getting a win over Oregon, but I- I'm not convinced they're a tournament team right now, not even close. So you're looking at, I think, 2 to 3 uh, teams that are going to the big dance. UConn, St. John's will get there. I think you're hopefully getting 1 or 2 others,
Yeah,
but it's looking pretty ugly for the Big
it
East.
is. Like, there's 2 teams that are definitely going to make it at this point, and
Yeah,
you only have 11 wins in the top 2 quads as a conference so far.
that's
Um,
bad. And they've
and
had chances too. They've
yeah,
had a lot.
yeah,
UConn's been putting some heavy work for them.
both. I mean, UConn has 4 of the 11 wins in the top 2 quads, and
Yeah.
there's only
How many
five.
does St. John's have?
They are 0-3 in quad one, 2-0 in quad
Oh,
two.
wow.
So
Yeah.
St. John's left players era 1 and 2. Creighton did also, like you said, Mike. It was not a good feast week for the Big East. Um, but on the other hand, like Butler did well in Greenbrier, that's why they're so high, and Seton Hall did well in Maui, and Seton Hall is a little bit interesting in the fact that they have a couple power conference games here, but not against like high quality teams right now. They go on the road to Kansas State, who just lost a bye game to Bowling Green, and then they play in their game against Rutgers, which rotates between the two. I believe it's at the Prudential Center. So, Seton Hall's got 2 power conference opponents here that, unfortunately for them, are just not going to be all that different from a bye game in terms of numbers. So they probably
Yeah.
need both of those to make the tournament, because if UConn and St. John's are the only like definite tournament teams off the bubble, that just leaves such a fine margin for error when it comes to picking up big wins in conference play. And like I said earlier, they don't have any big wins already as a conference. So Big East definitely a little bit worrying there. Mike, we had another big game in the ACC SEC Challenge on Tuesday, and that was North Carolina going on the road to Rupp Arena and picking up a victory, 67-62. Kentucky, Mark Pope, they dropped to 5-3. Their problems have been sort of aired out publicly with all of Mark Pope's comments about chemistry and effort and all that. And North Carolina seems to just be plotting along. Like, they lost to Michigan State on a neutral, who's a really good team, but North Carolina beats Kansas. They beat Kentucky on the road. Like, they are slowly but surely getting themselves back into the conversation of where North Carolina should be. Their bigs are really solid. They probably need a little better guard play. But Mike, this one to me is about Kentucky. I think they're miles off it right now, way, way off from last year, and things better turn around quick for them, because they will get eaten alive in the SEC unless they shore some things up.
Yeah, it kind of seems like a sophomore slump for Mark Pope and his squad. Look, Calipari got fired for probably a lot less than this, but like you said, it seems like this team just lacks chemistry. You looked at, for example, this North Carolina game, they got out rebounded -11. Um, Tough to win games when you're getting out rebounded by 11. You see against Michigan State, they got absolutely bodied in that game. they also got dominated on the boards. So there's a theme there, right? They need to get better rebounding the basketball, and their bigs are struggling pretty significantly right now. I think what's concerning about Kentucky is that you've also got some talent that's returning. Like Owe, you would have thought that he would have been stepping up and being one of the leaders in the country in scoring, but he has struggled this year pretty significantly. Maybe not struggled, but not been the best that
Yeah,
he could
he's
be.
been a little banged up, and so is Jalon Lowe, and they are probably not practicing a whole lot because they're very injured. But yeah, like this is just not what Mark Pope's teams have looked like. We've seen it for a couple of years now, whether it was at BYU or here. They had 1 3 in this game, Mike. One, and it was from Brandon Garrison, who's their backup five. Like, that was. I don't remember it off the top of my head. I'm guessing that was not the shot that they drew up. So, look, you get
That's fair.
outshot. Like, I guess it's basically rebounds versus turnovers, however many shots you get up. They were outshot in this game by 11, like you said, minus 11 on the rebounds. If you're not going to shoot it well, you can't get less attempts up. You've got to get more
Yeah.
so you can even out the percentages. But, Kentucky does. I'm monitoring right now. Like, I don't know if
Yeah.
they're bad or they're going to miss a tournament or anything, but they have 3 big games before they even see an SEC team. They've got Gonzaga in Nashville tomorrow night as of this recording. They've got Indiana, and then they have St. John's at the CBS Sports Classic, which is in Georgia. So, like, they don't have a couple bye games to figure this thing out before January 1st. They've got 3 pretty tough games, and then, of course, you know what happens after the calendar turns. But definitely monitoring Kentucky so far.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think another thing you got to look at is their ability to close big games, right? The first couple, Louisville and Michigan State, they got blown out. So we didn't really get to see a chance, which is a huge red flag. But you look at this game, this team had a 5 point lead with 6 minutes to go, and they scored 9 points the rest of the way. They got outworked, out rebounded, and dominated by North Carolina in those last several minutes of the game. So right now, like not only are we seeing them not close games, but in the other games they're losing, they're getting run out of the floor. They don't have a win outside of quad three. So they've got a lot of work to do right now down there in Lexington. A
And
lot
no,
of work.
and none of their losses are against bad teams, but like you said, Mike, they were. I know they lost to Louisville by 8. They weren't
They were
really. They
dominating.
were not really in that game. They banged a bunch of threes late and made that thing look close. And then Michigan State was the same thing. Like if you're down by 20 and you lose by like 8 to 12, that is a blowout in my eyes. Maybe not in the Ken Palm eyes, but
Yeah.
they were never going after halftime. They were never going to win either of those games, and it was a busy day of hoops, Mike. I didn't watch every single play of this game. I had it on, but it was like every time you look over, okay, when's Kentucky gonna pull away? When's Kentucky gonna pull away? They're up by 4, they're up by 6, they're up by 2. Never happened. And that's how you get snake bit at home. North Carolina's a good enough team to do that. Um, but yeah, monitoring Kentucky. I think North Carolina is a pretty solid third in the ACC right now. It's been a pretty good season so far for the ACC. They obviously got 7 wins in this challenge. One of the teams that won unexpectedly is right above them here for the viewers. But um, let's take a look at the ACC numbers, Mike. But we weren't exactly a really doom and gloom, but definitely monitoring the ACC a little bit. But the net is really backing them up. The ACC might be a little bit better than we thought.
Yeah. No, absolutely. The ACC well performed, outperformed expectations in the SEC ACC challenge. And I think part of that might be that the SEC isn't as good as expected. And sometimes, you get more favorable matchups. But I don't think the ACC got super favorable matchups in this one. You looked at some of these games that some of their top teams had to play. They were tough
Yeah,
environments.
2 of the top 3 in
Um,
the ACC had to go on the road.
yeah, yeah. And those teams like Louisville,
They
they
lost.
lost.
Yeah. That might be the
Yeah.
best team in the league.
It
Yeah.
was it was a lot of these middle tier teams in the ACC that were finding ways to win. Virginia was dominant against Texas on the road in Austin yesterday. That was the one highlight for the ACC yesterday. It was a rough day in the conference, but overall, significantly outperforming expectations right now over the Atlantic Coast Conference.
Yeah, they've got 8 teams in the top 50, Mike, and 11 if you stretch it out to 70. Like, these teams in the 70s and 80s like Syracuse, Wake, Stanford and Notre Dame, Like, they're probably not going to make the tournament, but if you're 12th place in your league and 80th in the net, and you win 3 games in a row against teams above you, like, you're going to be 50th. Like, it's
Yeah.
just like the ACC is set up for a lot of bids right now. I did one bracketology. I believe I had 5. I had SMU in. I may have had, yeah, I think I had 7 ACC teams in. And I think the likes of Virginia Tech and Notre Dame are probably better than some of the teams that are just above them right now. I think the ACC is in really good shape so far, and that's why we keep talking about the numbers right now. I know there's 3/4 of the season left, but when you're playing each other, there's only so much movement that can happen, right? Because one team goes up, the other team goes down, and vice versa. But it's sort of what the SEC did last year. They dominated conference play. That's why they got 14 bids. It's because if you're a bunch of good teams playing each other, you're only going to move so far. So ACC, really, really promising start for them. Obviously, they lose the challenge, Mike, but I think they come out of this better than the SEC from where they started. Syracuse picks up a win against Tennessee at home. And Syracuse, Mike, is a team that's 5-3. They lost some games at Players Era, but they were right in them with some good teams, and they're shooting like 50% from the line on the season. But this was another game, Mike, that could have gone either way, but Syracuse gets the job done.
I took the words out of my mouth, Sean. I was about to bring up Syracuse getting a statement win against Tennessee. Look, they lost all 3 games in Players Era out of the Big 12. But when you look at those games, Houston, one of the top teams in the country, they lost by 4. Kansas, they were at a deadlock. I think they were 2 points down with 6 minutes to go. That was very tight competitive basketball game that they kind of just lost coming down the stretch. And then Iowa State, they got blown out. But regardless, this Syracuse team can play. And I would not be surprised. They've got a pretty easy schedule. I think they just play a bunch of cupcakes before they go into conference play.
They
they're
get
going to be able to.
Oh, that's conference play. Yeah,
that's conference play.
Yeah.
But between now and that Clemson game, they're going to have 5 good chances to pick up some wins, and slide into a chance to really be seriously considered for the tournament. Look, they had those 3 losses in Players Era. I understand it. But in terms of the metrics, those losses are not going to look that bad, with the exception of maybe Iowa State. And then you're going to look at a lot of chances to pick off some good wins in the ACC.
At Players Era, Mike, against Houston, who they took to overtime, one of the best teams in the country, they're 12 for 29 from the free throw line. That is about as
12
bad
of 29.
12 of 29. And then against Kansas in that game that you mentioned, 13 of 23. And then in the third game against Iowa State, I think they were sort of, weird stuff happens in the third game of MTEs, but they were 12 of 19 from the free throw line in that game too. So it seems like if they can just, like, they are long and athletic like the Syracuse teams of old. Now, they're not playing that 2-3 zone as much, but that is like the uncomfortable Syracuse that some of us remember. Like, it's just hard to get passes off. It's hard to get catches off in your spots. Like, they are playing pretty solid basketball right now. They get the win. Tennessee's a good team. Like, they're gonna need that win to take them in, and they're gonna have to pick off 1 or 2 probably big wins in the ACC. But there's at least a chance, Mike. 13 of 22 last night from the free throw line too. So let's see if they. It seems like pretty simple. If they can shoot,
Figure out the charity strike.
It seems like if they can make some free throws, they're gonna win pretty much. I think they would have 1 loss right now if they could shoot 70% from the free throw line. So, obviously, that's sort of a surprise. I didn't really see this happening. I think, Adrian Autry is under immense pressure this year to get things right. Like, he's not really got that program off the ground since he took over from Jim Boeheim, but it seems like he may have just got this thing in time. Mike, we had a Big Ten game, 2 Big Ten games on Tuesday, but one that we're going to talk about here. Coming into the game, it was 7-0 Iowa versus 7-0 Michigan State. Ben McCollum, new kids on the block. They go into the Breslin Center and unfortunately get a pretty brutal wake-up call when it comes to Big Ten basketball.
Welcome to the show.
Michigan State wins 71-52. Every time we talk about them, Mike, I think Michigan State's expectations go up. They are a really good basketball team, and they are beating a lot of good teams by a lot of points.
Yeah, we certainly didn't necessarily see this coming. We thought Michigan State would be a good metric for the Big Ten, but they're leading what's probably the best conference in college basketball right now. You're looking at their quality wins right now. Kentucky, North Carolina, a beat down of Iowa, and then they're going to have Duke this Saturday. It's going to be a really good one. That's going to be a really fun one to watch. See how they can stack up against Koomar and Boozer. And they're doing this. Look, they're still not shooting the 3-point ball like incredibly well. They were 25% against Iowa, but they smoked them at home, and it's because they're able to dominate the boards, create good looks down low for them, and give them a good chance to win and just play really good defense. Look, they got to put in the scrubs in this one. They got the walk-ons in. If you can get the walk-ons in any Big Ten game, that's a win, especially from an Iowa team that's had a really good start.
And Mike, Michigan State is like third by a significant margin in terms of the numbers here in the Big Ten, and they're still seventh in the country. Like you have Michigan at
Yeah,
1, Purdue at 3, Michigan State at 10 here in the net. They already have 2 quad 1 wins, 2 quad 2 wins. Um, they have 2 wins against the bubble, like 7-0. I think like this is the Michigan State product, right? It's not like they're playing all that different. They're not doing anything, crazy. They're playing defense and they're efficient enough on offense. They don't, jack a bunch of threes and play like modern basketball to a T, but when you defend, you can take a lot of twos, and that's what they do. And it just seems like to beat them, it's going to have to take like such a complete effort. And
yeah,
that to me like sort of eliminates all but like 15 teams in the country that are even capable of that. So Michigan State might be the third best team in the Big Ten, but they could be like this seventh or eighth best team in the country. But Iowa's a good basketball team, and they made them look like they were an NIT team. But really,
yeah.
really
I mean,
impressive here for
Jackson
Michigan
Kohler just
State.
keeps having an outstanding season. He's averaging pretty much a double double this year, 9.9 rebounds, so effectively a double double. And in this game, you take the top three rebounders from Michigan State, and they out rebound Iowa. Look, Michigan State was plus 19 on the boards. So this team can play big. They're not going to shoot a million threes behind the arc like a lot of teams are in college basketball. It just seems so unique how Michigan State is almost the antithesis where you're seeing most teams, most programs going to shooting 30 plus threes a night. Michigan State shot 12. They only made 3 of them and they won by 19.
And
Crazy.
and part of that rebounding part, Mike, is that to get a rebound, the shot like you have to force a tough shot because it doesn't
Yeah.
go in, and that just seems like it's a really good combo, right? Force tough shot, get rebound. Like
Yeah.
their 2 point defense is good. Their 3 point defense in general goes up and down across the league because usually it's the shot that you want to give up, and sometimes teams make them when they're contested, and sometimes they miss them when they're open. But 2 point defense is really the staple of Michigan State basketball, and they are operating at a pretty great and efficient level so far. But like you said, Mike, they haven't ignored the transfer portal. They have a couple over the years, but they're really developing some of these players that were average role players when they arrived, and now they're going to be all Big Ten selections. So Michigan State going to have to take quite the effort to beat them. All right, Mike, we'll go to Wednesday this week. Another couple of good games in the ACC SEC Challenge. We had John Calipari and Arkansas pick up a huge, much-needed big victory there. They jumped out to a huge lead against Louisville, up 18 at halftime. It was 20 at points. They took Louisville's best shot coming down the stretch in the second half. I believe they got it to 6, but it's the Razorbacks that prevail, 89-80. Just when you think Calipari's going to do the thing again, he turns it around and picks up a huge victory. What an important one from Arkansas.
Absolutely. We looked at Arkansas, blew a lot of good opportunities earlier on in this year. This was their first statement win of the season to do it at home and at Bud Walton. That's got to feel good, right? They, like I said, they had their chances. Michigan State went down to the wire. Duke, they played them pretty well, but this one was dominant in the first half. They let Louisville eke back into this game, but they were able to shut the door pretty solidly here. You look at Trevin Brazil and Darius Acuff; they're guys that really led the team here. You know, Brazil's been around for a long time.
Yeah.
But he was absolutely lights out in the first half to be able to propel Arkansas ahead. He's a guy that's been in the Arkansas program for 4 years now. He's been around. I think he's the only scholarship player that Calipari had going into his first year there. But Acuff also a strong freshman. You've got that combination of guys. You got the new really good freshman phenom with some experienced guys in Brazil, and that's a recipe for success for Arkansas.
Yeah, they to me here, like they took a really really good surge from Louisville and they shook it off and still won the game. And Louis
Yeah.
like a lot of these losers now, I think we've gotten to like the point where if we've seen you play well 6 times, then you lose game number 7 or 8, like you're still a good team. And Louisville did that here. But Arkansas, man, like Bud Walton, one of the toughest places to play in the SEC. Um, and Arkansas, it doesn't get any easier for them. Like they've got, you have to think like at what point is like the non-conference for some of these teams more difficult than conference play when they know the opponents better. Arkansas has Texas Tech on the road in about a week and a half, or not on the road, but in Dallas where the Mavericks play, and then they go to New Jersey to play Houston in the Never Forget Tribute Classic. So 2 really tough games on top of the 3 or 4 that they've already played, and then SEC play starts. So John Calipari has never really been one to shy away from a tough schedule. He certainly did not do that here, and at least they're going to come away with at least one really good win from these games. Like this is a great win for the tournament, and instead of getting seeped down into the middle of the pack in the SEC, it looks like they're going to punch a little bit above that. But we had Alabama hold on for a 90-84 victory over Clemson. Mike, this looked like it was going to be a big win for Alabama. They're up 15 at halftime, and you look back and you see that Clemson's in the game. Alabama gets the job done, but you've got to be pretty pleased if you're Clemson here that you took an Alabama team on the road pretty tight.
Yeah, this was certainly a sloppier second half for Alabama. And part of that you attribute to having a lot of key players out for this one. They had a lot of players that did not get to suit up for this game due to injury. But Clemson, look, they were able to hang in there. This was a game that was looking like it was going to be a bloodbath. And then you turned around at the 6 minute mark and this was a game. I'm pretty sure they even took the lead at one point in this one coming down the stretch with like 3 or 4 minutes to go. So Clemson, you feel good about their chances of making a tournament run potentially after this one. This was, I think, the first really good look. We saw them beat West Virginia and Georgia. Those aren't particularly good teams this year, but they're going to have another big test this week against or next week against Brigham Young. That's going to be a huge one for them.
Yeah, they led the game 83-81, Mike, with 2:41 left. Now they only get 1 point the rest of the way, and they had a real chance to win this game, but like a 6-point loss on the road at Alabama is going to look pretty good in the numbers. And I know it's about winning and losing games. It always will be, but like they were awfully close to pulling off something really nice here. And when I showed the ACC teams earlier, they were in there. But they're still pretty good. It seems like Brad Brownell can lose sort of like program guys like PJ Hall, Ian Shefflin, and gets a bunch of transfers that were solid players on solid teams, and they're right back there. Like they have six players who average at least 8 points a game, and 8 players who average at least 7 points a game. That is incredible depth, and if you want to go one more, 9 that average 6 points a game. So you have 9 players who can get you 3 buckets a game. Like that's 50 points right there. So and they're a good defensive team, so you don't need more than that. But there's been a lot of pretty solid efforts and losses this week across the board, and it's still about winning, obviously. But Clemson's gonna probably leave this one, pretty happy with the effort that they gave. All right, Mike, let's go to one more ACC SEC game. It's Vanderbilt They opened at fourth in the opening version of the net. That was a little bit surprising. They went down and ran through the battle for Atlantis, weaker field than usual, but SMU is a solid team, probably in the tournament as of now, and Vanderbilt blew them out, 88-69 victory. Mike, do you think the Commodores could compete here at the top of the SEC?
Yeah, the Commodores might be for real here. They've still to beat a ranked team so far, so we still haven't seen the furthest potential they can. But really, the only close game they've had so far this year was against Western Kentucky. You look at, UCF on the road, they controlled and dominated that game. Dominated every game in the battle for Atlantis, with the exception of that Western Kentucky game. And then they come to SMU, or they host SMU, and they get a dominant win. Look, certainly part of that is there's a home court advantage there at Vanderbilt that some places certainly don't have. It's a weird place, but uh, if you look at their ability to make a run, and they're going to have plenty of opportunities to pick off a couple of other good wins. They're already undefeated on the season. If they can finish the out of conference on that note, which is going to be harder than you think because they got to go to Wake Forest pretty soon in a couple weeks. That's going to be a tough one. But if they can finish the out of conference undefeated, they've got a really good chance of being able to compete for a protected seed in the NCAA tournament. And I certainly think that they're not on the same level that I think Alabama is. We didn't get to talk about Alabama much. They're still missing some really key
Yeah,
players.
yeah,
You look at
yeah.
Alabama. Jaleel Bethea still hasn't seen the court. Aiden Holloway, Keaton Bristow are still out. But you look at, maybe that second tier, I think that's where you see Vanderbilt.
And they don't have any ranked wins, but they have 3 wins over teams in the top 50 in the net. That's important. Obviously, the top 50 in the net on a neutral is a quad one game. Like St. Mary's for sure will stay there. They won that game by a lot. You would think VCU will probably be right around there, so that has a chance to be quad one. And then SMU at home probably won't be quad one because you got to be top 25 for that. But still, they could have 3 wins over the tournament field right now, and they still have to go on the road to Memphis and Wake. Probably not tournament teams, but also road games. All those teams have to do is get to 75th for them to be quad ones. So Vanderbilt could have like 4 quad one wins before SEC play starts, and if they go 500, that's 5 or 6 more quad one wins at least.
Yeah.
So Vanderbilt is doing their work early, which they probably had to do. But yeah, I think they could. If the top tier is not as strong as we might think, I think there's a chance they might be able to sneak in it. 14,
Yeah.
12,
And
13, 14 wins in the SEC.
And you look at the SEC right now, their best ranked team right now is Alabama at 12th, right? Or Tennessee's 13th, but they're going to drop after that loss to Syracuse. Florida's going to drop after their loss. Kentucky might drop out of the rankings pretty soon. You never know. So you look at this SEC, you look at a conference that is wide open. But if I had to power rank Vanderbilt right now, I'm probably still sneaking them at probably the fifth slot.
Yeah, I think 4 or 5
Be
is where
honest.
I would have them too. But um, Auburn also gets a win over NC State, Mike, in the
That was a good one. Yeah.
nightcap here, and NC State 5-3. They didn't look. They got thrown into the top 25. I think that was just because they were going to Maui. They wanted a ranked team there. They end up losing a couple games there, and they lose this one to Auburn. Auburn is still a pretty solid team. I think that opening game against Bethune was a fluke. They took Houston to the brink. They looked pretty good here. Yeah, Kevin Overton was I guess he wasn't a role player is harsh, but he was on Texas Tech last year. He averaged 8 points a game. He wasn't really a super important player for them. He's got 29 and 9 here, and that's a guard, by the way, doing that, or a small forward. But they Auburn is pretty solid. Obviously, a big overreaction after overtime against a bad team. They seem to have righted the ship a little bit here in NC State. We might have to pump the brakes just a little bit on Will Wade in year one.
I mean, look, this is a brand new team, so they've got a lot to develop, but they don't have much time for NC State. Look, they've got a couple more games before they take on Kansas, and then they're going to have Ole Miss and then the conference play. And with the ACC looking a lot tougher than we initially thought, they could be in a world of hurt soon if they don't figure this out. So they've got a lot of ball to figure out here. And I think those losses, right? The Seton Hall, maybe you can excuse that loss. Maui, it can be weird. That's a huge time
Especially the
travel
third
for
day.
them
Especially
coming
the
from the
third
East
day.
Coast. And look, they looked okay against Auburn, but
Yeah.
um, they got some work to do.
Yeah, like they were Auburn's a solid team. I think their ranking is pretty appropriate. They're probably in the 15 to 20 range, and they were like pretty convincingly not as good as that team.
Yeah.
And I know it's on the road and it would have been hard for them to win, but like that they're just screaming bubble team to me like right now, like 45th in the net, 4 quad 1 wins, probably 23 wins. It's screaming bubble so far. They have a couple good players like Darion Williams is still really good, and Quadir Copeland is pretty good, but maybe not quite as the really really good team that people may have thought that we had at NC State. All right, Mike, let's wrap this up with a preview of a couple of the this weekend's games. We're going to start with the Music City Friday game in Nashville. That's going to be Gonzaga going to play Kentucky. Now, I know it says Rupp Arena there, but that is wrong.
The Bridgestone.
It's in Nashville.
Yeah.
ESPN2, 7 o'clock Eastern. Gonzaga coming off of that pretty humbling defeat by 40 to Michigan at the Players there. Now, I know they've played since then, but this is a series that has proven to be quite the contest of the last few years, Mike. Remember that February game where we had Gonzaga on the bubble, and they came in and won at Rupp Arena, and then they ended up getting a 6th seed and were pretty good. And then last year we had the game up in Seattle where I believe Kentucky won. I'm going to have to check that. But this is a series that has gone back and forth, and Gonzaga looking to put that Michigan game behind them. If they win this game, that's a fluke. And Kentucky, like we talked about it earlier, they need like something positive to go in their direction. But what do you see happening here?
Yeah, I'm going to go with Kentucky in this one. I think there's a lot of things to look out for. Kentucky really needs a big win, right? We've been talking about it. There's all these grumblings from about Mark Pope and his grumblings with his program. You look at Gonzaga. Look, they need some revenge. They're coming off of a 40-point shellacking by Michigan,
They have
a
actually
very good
not.
team.
They have not played since Players era, so this will be their
They have
first game
not.
since.
So they've had that sour taste in their mouth for the last week. Um, this is going to be a Kentucky crowd that is going to it's going to be a 90% Kentucky crowd, even though it says it's a neutral. This is not a neutral court game. You look at Gonzaga, what they're going to have to do, right? Their tips to winning this game is they're going to have to find a way to dominate the boards, and they're going to have to find a way to close out Kentucky on the 3-point line. Gonzaga's given up a lot of points this year, even when they've won big games. They gave up 101 to Michigan. They gave up 95 to Alabama. They've given up like a lot of points in some of these games. They're going to have to find a way to close out on the 3-point line and box out Kentucky. If they can do those things, they can get a win. However, I'm going to go with the Cats. They're going to need a win. They need to win badly. They're going to be in front of a home crowd. I'm going with Kentucky.
This is a real important one for Kentucky, like you said. Like, if they win it, we'll be like, all right, like they're fine. They're not going to win the national title, but they're going to be a top half SEC team that gets a 5, 6, or 7 seed, like at worst. In terms of Gonzaga, Mike, they were metric darlings before that Michigan game. They were number 1 in KenPom at the moment. They've proven that they're like definitely a step ahead of these like middle of the pack power conference teams like Oklahoma, Creighton, Arizona State. They had that Alabama win, and then it turns out that like Maryland is not any good at all. So I know they won that game by 39, but like that's probably not.
What's it worth?
Like they probably thought that had a chance of being a quad 1, with it being on a neutral. That at this point like Maryland might have to play well for it to be a quad 2, but. This is a big one for them. Like their non-conference is so important for Gonzaga too. Like them and Memphis, they schedule really tough in the non-con because their leagues aren't as tough. Gonzaga does have UCLA and Oregon after this, so and they have the win against Alabama, and they're not gonna like miss a tournament or anything. But I think some questions could be asked about Gonzaga potentially not being a national title threat if Kentucky could get the job done here, but I just don't see it. Gonzaga came down here 2 years ago and won. I think they get the job done again, but I think it's an effort from Kentucky that, like, isn't as sort of pathetic as some of these other ones. Like, I think they put up a good fight. I think Gonzaga's just a little better.
No, absolutely, it's fair.
All right, let's go to Saturday, Mike. College football Saturday, but we've got some basketball games here early on. We're going to talk about 3 of them. We're going to start at Mackey Arena in Indiana. We've got Iowa State, TJ Otzelberger at 8-0, looking to play the number 1 team in the country, Purdue, also with an 8-0 record. It's Purdue by 5.5 right now. This is a huge opportunity for both of these teams for a quad 1A win.
Yeah. You look at this one, Purdue has shown why they're the number 1 team in the country. They lost that ranking for a little bit, but they've dominated pretty much every game except for that Memphis first game in Baha Mar. Going to be a great matchup against Iowa State. You got 2 Midwest teams that like to control possession, slow it down a little bit, especially with Iowa State. Can they maintain that slow tempo? We've put up a lot of points this year in some games. They put up 132 this week against Alcorn State.
Yeah, they hit
Um,
22 out of 29 threes.
yeah, you don't see that too much out of Iowa State teams. But this is going to be a really fun one in Mackey. I think you got to give the advantage to the number 1 team in the country at home. Purdue's been flawless this year, but this is going to be a really fun one. And for Iowa State, look, they haven't played a road game this year. So watching how they react to being on the road in one of the tougher places to play in the Big Ten, it's going to be a fun one.
Yeah, the first true road game thing gets said all the time, but there's a reason for that. Like, and neutral courts are not the same as true road games. They're just not.
They're not.
Like, even if this game was in Indianapolis, which the other team from Indiana is playing in, like, it is an advantage for the home team, but Mackey is, like, a very unique place, the shape of it. I've never been there personally, but it is like a circle rather than sort of like the, rectangle shape of, like, a basketball stadium. So the noise really sort of stays in there. Noon tip, Purdue's first huge crowd of the season. Like, their big games, Purdue's big games this year have been at Baha Mar and on the road at Alabama. Like, this is their first huge home game. I think they get the job done, but again, like, I think it is going to, like, just because Purdue wins this game by 12 or something doesn't mean we have to worry about Iowa State. I just think it's a really tough place to be for your first road game. All right, Mike, that's on CBS. This one at the same time on Fox, 12 o'clock noon Eastern time. We've got Duke going up to the Breslin Center to play Michigan State. Duke looking for win number 10. Michigan State looking for win number 9. Does not have the line here, but you have to think it'd be pretty close to even with Michigan State as the home team. But Cam Boozer versus the Michigan State front court, that's got to be the matchup that determines it.
Absolutely. And I'm going to go with Michigan State in this one. Look, I think, aside from maybe Michigan, they're clearly the best team appearance-wise in the Big Ten. And they might be one of the top 5 best teams in the country right now. I think they are. They've been absolutely dominant. And that's going to be the matchup. Cam Boozer against Michigan State's front court. Who's going to get that win? I think Michigan State playing at home in front of the Izzone is going to have the advantage there. We've already seen that this year in some of their games. Absolutely dominant at home against Kentucky. So I'm going to go with the Spartans to get the job done.
Yeah, I think so too. Duke, it is not their first road game. They did go on the road to play Army, but in terms of a extremely good atmosphere and a top team, this is their first true road game. I just think Michigan State's disruptive enough to make Duke they won't be comfortable early, and I think Michigan State will be winning already. Like, that might be enough for the win. I'm going to say Michigan State wins a close one, but they're sort of keeping them at arm's length for the majority of the way. Duke might make a run to make it like 5 or 6, but Michigan State, I think, picks up a big win. And Mike, if the Big Ten wins these 3 games that we're going to talk about here, we are looking at 12 or 13 bids, I think, in terms of the tournament. Like, the numbers are already really good, and you have 3 really good opponents. Chance for the Big Ten to look even better than it is right now. Game number 3 will be in Indianapolis. It's both of these teams coming off their first loss of the year. We've got number 6 Louisville going up to Gainbridge Fieldhouse to play number 22 Indiana. Both teams coming off of losses here in their first true road games. It's a huge day in Indianapolis for the Hoosiers with the Big Ten football championship just a few hours after this across the street at Lucas Oil Stadium. But Mike, didn't expect both these teams to be coming in here with a loss. Somebody's going to leave this one with a 2-game losing streak. What do you think happens here?
Yeah, I think right now I just haven't seen enough out of Indiana for me to think that they're going to be able to compete with one of the top teams in the country on a neutral court. Granted, it is going to be an Indiana dominant crowd here in Indianapolis. Like you said, there's going to be a lot of positive energy going for the Hoosiers with the Big Ten championship game going on later that night. But with that being said, they did not look very good on the road against a Minnesota team that's not very good. Um, they looked like they were going to pull away with this game early. They had I think an 8-point lead in this one late in the first half, and then got absolutely worked in the second half. So I'm going to go with the Louisville Cardinals.
Yeah, I think Louisville travels well enough where it like won't be a. It'll probably be like 2/3 to 1/3. Like it's not that far from Louisville. Yeah. Probably 2-3 hours.
It's not. Yeah.
But like both these teams got punched in the mouth in their last game. Louisville did in the first half and performed pretty well, honestly, to make it a game. If you're down by 20 on the road anywhere and you make it a game at some point, like you got to do something right. And it was kind of the opposite from Indiana, Mike. Like they were leading at arm's length for the first half against Minnesota. You're like, all right, they're probably going to pull away here. Nice run from Minnesota end the half, and then in the second half, Minnesota made like a bunch of shots, and Indiana didn't. There was a little bit of a game plan there from Minnesota that might work. They just stuck to shooters and gave up one-on-one layups, and Indiana only has a couple players who can really finish inside. So I think if Minnesota really slowed that game down, and that game was only 66 possessions. I don't know if Louisville wants to do that. Like, a track meet style benefits both teams here, and like when you do that, it's just a lot of volatility with a lot of three-pointers that both these teams shoot, that this game could be, I think both these teams could win by 20 here. Like, Louisville shoots like 43s a game. Indiana's in the high 20s. Somebody could go like 18 for 42 and win this game by 20. I do think Louisville will probably win. They seem to have a little bit more, fight when things got tough in their appropriate road game. And Indiana did kind of wither a little bit. Like, Minnesota is a team that has lost to a couple teams that turn out to be pretty good, Santa Clara and San Francisco, but Indiana should have won that game. They didn't. How did they respond here? They have Penn State, and then Kentucky. In a week and a half or so, we're going to learn a lot about Indiana and whether, the protected seed range, which many people had them right now, or a bubble team is going to be more accurate. Could be either one, but I think Louisville wins a close one with a ton of lead changes and swings, and it'll be a pretty fun game. But after that, Mike, there's a couple Big Ten games in here. Florida State goes to the Toyota Center to play Houston. Don't really need to spend some time on that, but we have 3 huge games to end the day here as we wrap this up. 8 o'clock on ESPN, Game 2 of the Music City event in Nashville. We've got Brad Underwood and Illinois going down to play Tennessee. Both these teams have been kind of punched in the mouth recently. Tennessee, the loss up at the Carrier Dome. Illinois, the loss to somebody in Chicago.
They lost to Alabama and UConn, Alabama and Chicago, and then UConn.
And then UConn and New York City. So,
yeah.
This is another great opportunity for somebody to be like, all right, we got the losses behind us. We pick up a quad 1 neutral court win. And on the other hand, it's, here we go again, loss number 3. Somebody's got to win. Somebody's got to lose. Who's it going to be?
Yeah. Stojakovic, this is going to have to be a big rebound game for him if Illinois is going to win. He really struggled against UConn, scored just 3 points on 1 of 7 shooting. also only played in 24 minutes in that one. I'm not sure if there was something going on there. Maybe he was sick or battling an injury or something that wasn't disclosed. But Illinois has to stop relying on Boswell to be able to score the ball and just drive and make things happen come down the stretch. They relied on that against Alabama in their loss. It was pretty much the only offense they had against UConn, the team that did not shoot the ball well. So they're going to need that. You look on the flip side with Tennessee. Look, that was a kind of an embarrassing loss to Syracuse. Not saying Syracuse is a bad team, but the manner that they lost it was not impressive. They also lost to Kansas in the third place game of the Players era. So back-to-back losses. Try not to make it a third. Look, this is as close to a home game as you could get without it being called a home game for Tennessee. They dominate the Nashville market as you could expect. But with that being said, I'm going to go with the Fighting Illini here. I think Stojakovic has a good comeback game for the Fighting Illini. I think they're able to weather the up tempo of Tennessee, and they're going to be able to get the job done.
For Illinois, it really comes down to like when they want to pass and move the ball, they get an open
Yeah,
shot. Like when they get stuck in ISO, Stojakovic ISO range aside, he is great one on one, and not many people can stop him. But when they get too isolation based, and they take bad shots, Tennessee's good enough to defend that, like they are. And when Illinois
oh,
hits, when Illinois is accurate with their passes and they hit them, and Boswell, gets double digit assists, they get open shots. Now sometimes they make them, sometimes they don't, but I think it's a pretty similar story with Illinois from past years, Mike. I think there's a lot of different versions of this team we can see, and like I said for the last game, they could win this game pretty convincingly. Wouldn't be
yeah.
surprised. And it could be the flip side. Like it could be a 15 plus point victory for either team. I think Tennessee, I'm just going to give the advantage to, though, with them being slightly closer to home. I think Illinois fans will get down there too. Like it's definitely driving distance for them. Not, a day trip like it probably is for Louisville up in Indy. But this is a fun one. Like really fun Saturday of college hoops. Obviously, most eyes are going to be on the football, but six really good games here, Mike. And 8 o'clock on Peacock, Chris Beard and Ole Miss at 5-3 are heading up to the world's most famous arena to play St. John's and Rick Pitino at 4-3. Mike, both these teams sort of really have to win this game.
We've seen also a lot of different sides of St. John's. After the Baylor game, when Rick Pitino was interviewed, he said, "Yeah, those first 10 minutes, I think our team could have competed with the New York Knicks. They were absolutely dominant, shot the daylights out of the ball, were out physical Baylor, and they just broke Baylor's will in that game. But then they followed that up with a dud against Auburn. They lost by 11 points in that game. They didn't really compete very well. So we've seen a lot of sides to St. John's. Look, that Iowa State game, they fought really hard. Right now, I just think they're better than Ole Miss. Uh, Ole Miss, this is not Chris Beard's best team. They are coming off of three straight losses. Miami, they didn't really compete very well on that one. Utah is not a very good loss either. So I'm going to go with Patino's squad to get a big win at the Garden.
Yeah, I think so too. Like Ole Miss to me just like screams, or on the other hand, Miami to me screams like they're going to be the first team out or the last team in, and they were run off their own floor by them. So I think this team's
Yeah.
really a good distance away from the tournament right now, and I think you're going to have an energized night crowd here at MSG. I think St. John's wins by 20.
Yeah, I agree.
All right, we'll wrap this one up, Mike. Perfectly going to be right around an hour. Great. ESPN, 10 p.m. Eastern Time. We've got Auburn going on the road to play Arizona at the McHale Center. What a great end to a really awesome slate we've got here. Stephen Pearl looking to pull off what would be a really big upset on the road at number 2 Arizona. But outside of the three Big Ten teams, Mike, Arizona's probably been the most impressive. And you have Auburn, though, that is still looking for that, marquee win. What do you see going down here?
Yeah, that opening game against Bethune-Cookman has clearly been an outlier for Auburn. You look at how they've played the rest of the year. They have that one big loss to Michigan to open up players' era, but everybody lost big to Michigan. So, what difference does it make? They have a very, very narrow loss in a game that You could argue a couple calls go their way, they win that game against the Cougars. So that's, I think Auburn is coming in at a good time. They also had a nice win against NC State this week, but you're going on the road to play a really good Arizona team. I think they're the best team in the country right now when you look at the body of work that they've put ahead of themselves. And so right now, I think Arizona is going to get the dub. And I think they're probably going to win by 10 points.
Yeah,
They're the
and
best team in the country in my books.
I don't know if that means a whole lot to Auburn. Like,
No.
I think 5 to 6 teams can go in there and keep it within single digits. Like, I'd take Arizona
If.
by 5 over anybody at home. Like, the McHale Center is an awesome environment. It probably goes under the radar a little bit, Mike, because it's so late, especially for us here on the East Coast. But they've got some awesome, awesome atmospheres there. Even when they were back in the Pac-12, now in the year 2 in the Big 12 or year 3, they, to me, like, they've gone a little bit under the radar here. Like you said, they got beat pretty badly at Players Era, but I think we're going to look back at those games and be like, how the hell did that happen? Like, Michigan's a good
Yeah.
team, but so is Arizona. So, good one here. I think Arizona gets the job done. But a couple other big games on Saturday, Mike. We're not going to, I just want to mention them really. We've got Marquette, Wisconsin. We have Boise State at Butler. And it stopped loading. All right. Well, there's a bunch of other good games that are not ranked that we just don't have time to talk about tonight. But just a really awesome Saturday here. We're getting into final season and tonight, for example, the weekday slates aren't probably going to be great until conference play resumes. But we've got two really good Saturday slates. Three really. The 3 Saturdays before Christmas are all pretty good. And then after that, it's going to be conference play. So that's going to be it. We're getting into the thick of it, coming into about the quarter mark on the season. So as teams, hit the double-digit mark in games. But, Mike, that is all the time we have for them today. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.